We have officially completed our tiny Fairycore castle. I figured it could be fun to watch all of the episodes together in one kind of mini movie with a never before seen walkthrough of the fully decorated interior. Thank you so much for being here. Let's get into it. As always, we started out punching a tree and making a couple basic tools. I like to upgrade to stone as soon as possible because it's just so much more efficient to work with. And of course, we have to make our first furnace. I was lucky because this spot offered a very quick and easy access to stone, but B, also had a little bit of coal waiting for me. I had really no idea where I wanted to build for this. I knew I wanted to find a village to be my base of operations until I actually build my own. So I set out exploring almost immediately. I found a village not too long after that, and it is just perfect. Now that we have a place where we can throw all of our stuff when we've filled up our inventory, we can start thinking about setting down roots. I'm planning a very large, sort of sprawling build here. Definitely fairy village vibes, definitely cozy, kind of cottagecore. We'll probably end up transforming all of these buildings that are already here, as well as building a whole bunch of our own. With our bed, furnace, and table in place, we now officially had a temporary home. This village didn't have a whole lot of interesting loot. I do have a mod installed that's meant to increase the amount of villagers and add some variety in their types. Unfortunately, this tends to mean it adds 6 different floors to the same village. That's a benefit because we have 6 extra villagers to use, but it's not as much variety as I was hoping for. Oh, baby. Because I plan to build such a large-scale village here, I'm going to rely a lot on automation. I know some people hate that, but I frankly will just get way too bored of this world way too quickly to actually complete my goals if I don't. There are way more efficient and way smarter villager systems out there than what I'm going to do in this episode, but for now, let's go see what that boat has in store. As soon as I saw that cave, I was definitely thinking of using it as some kind of mine. I think it'd be really cool to have the village stretch across this whole sort of area, so the island that the original village is on, and all of the surrounding land with bridges and everything else. Just a very wide sprawling, almost kingdom. And a half-sunken mine is just such a vibe. I'm gonna be for real, I still have no idea what armor templates are really supposed to do. I get that they add decoration, but is that it? Fun fact, I'm terrible with maps. I don't really know what this is telling me, so we're just going to ignore it for now. While this cave didn't have a whole lot of iron, there was a good amount of exposed copper. And since I like to cheat, we do have a mod that allows us to create iron tools. Rather, copper tools that are just as good as iron. There really wasn't much else in here, just exposed. I will eventually dig deeper and try to access a good-sized cave. It'd be awesome if we could find a lush cave, but I don't know if we'll be that lucky. So the system that I plan to use for this village will rely heavily on an iron and string farm, which means we're going to get started on the iron farm pretty much right away. But I did spend this night hunting as many mobs as I could to gather their drops, specifically looking for string to start our string farm. So I set this save up a long time ago using multi-MC, so I'm not 100% sure what all mods are involved, but on my way to find lava for our iron farm, I came across this really cute bakery. Firstly, I love any mod that adds in structures that you can just wander across. But this was so adorable. I mean, it feels like something you'd see an actual starter house tutorial for. And it's a bakery inside. How cozy, how cute. I almost wanted to abandon all of my plans and just live here for the duration of my 2-week Minecraft phase. But it is my goal to make this a forever world, so we will have to leave for the time being. But look how cozy. Not very far from that, though, was something not so cozy. A whole pillager outpost. Right next to the lava pools. By this point, I was pretty suited out in armor, so I wasn't overly concerned about the ones with crossbows. Especially because if you line them up right, they'll just kind of take care of each other for you. But I wasn't feeling so cocky about that guy. I don't know what he is, I don't know what he does, and I don't want to chance it. We did snag a name tag out from under his nose, and I don't really know what he's guarding. I don't know if that's a villager stuck over there or what. So we grabbed our lava and got out of there. With that, we were ready to start our iron farm. I am following a tutorial for this, so I'll have that linked in the description so you can as well if you'd like. If you'd like a more in-depth look at how I plan to set up the system with these villagers, I do have a separate video about villager automation in regards to village building. I always like to start with the iron farm because iron is an incredibly useful resource, and I'm just too lazy to mine it as much as you really need it. Especially if you plan to set up a lot of other auto farms, they almost always require hoppers, and hoppers take a lot of iron. With that farm in place, it was then time to set up our main trade for emeralds, which is going to be string with fishing villagers. Both of these farms are just kind of set it and forget it. Once you turn them on or once you get them going, you don't really need to sit there doing anything. So long as you're still close enough to them for them to work. However, they are also very loud, so I wouldn't put them directly next to wherever you plan to be. And with that, we were set up to begin villager trading. There are, again, way more efficient ways of doing this. Systems that involve zombification and keeping everything in a neat little box, little villager hall. I would 100% recommend it. I do face consequences for letting them free roam, and it is way more expensive for me than it really needs to be. Since my goal was building up to a stone generator, not a cobblestone generator, I needed to get Silk Touch as soon as possible. I was super lucky that this village actually already had a librarian, so I didn't need to go through the process of creating a lectern, gathering books this early. Once I finished with the librarian, I immediately leveled up a toolsmith, so we could get a diamond pickaxe with efficiency and Silk Touch. I make at least 4 more librarians throughout this process, and a couple more fishing villagers, so I can keep doing this trade even when these ones haven't restocked. I do plan to make a gunpowder farm, which means we'll need a cat, but this one was just not working with me. This is probably one of my least favorite processes in the game. But I'm incredibly impatient, so that's not very surprising. Did I give up? Yes, but we will be back for it. With diamond tools and a couple enchanting books now available, it was time to get our armor. This I of course do, through an armorer villager. I would really recommend, again, being smarter. Go ahead and do the discount with the zombification. It doesn't need to be this expensive. But B, set up a storage system beforehand because I just have a mess in my chest. I'm gonna have to go through a whole separate episode, organizing everything, building a storage unit, just at least have a few set aside ready to go for all the duplicate items you're going to get to level them up. And in case I hadn't mentioned it yet, you also get a crazy amount of experience through this process. And it did not take very long before I had a full set of diamond armor. That's when I started thinking about netherite. I've never actually had netherite armor. I've never bothered with it. I've also never really cared about smithing templates, so it is kind of annoying that you need that upgrade, but I figured a netherite pickaxe is a perfect little compromise between doing something new and actually focusing on building again. I wanted to make sure I didn't have to buy all of these diamond tools any sooner than necessary, so I went ahead and made a mending villager as well. This left us with a fully enchanted, unbreaking, mending, and other such protections, diamond armor set, and almost complete set of tools. I don't know if it's the texture pack or if they always look like this, but this is really giving Jason vibes. I feel like those should have been hits. Thankfully, he doesn't hit anywhere near as hard as I was worried, and he was actually guarding a lost villager. After a fair bit of convincing, I managed to get him in the boat with me and brought him back to his new home. Psych? I have no idea what happened there. I searched all over the village, but that is just gone. I've never had that happen before. It's probably some weird glitch with one of the villager mods installed. But anyways, with that very odd encounter out of the way, I got started on a nether portal. And I'm really going to need someone to explain to me how this works. I understand that when one touches the other, it makes cobblestone or obsidian, and it looks like water touching lava makes cobblestone, but I just could not get this to work for me. So instead of making our own, we're gonna have to harvest it from the environment. While there, I did encounter another village, which was super cool because I love expanding my waystone network, which makes traveling just so much more convenient. The loot here wasn't anything crazy, but I will use one of these gold pieces to prevent the piglins from attacking me when we do eventually enter the nether. I really don't get the point of crying obsidian. Like, I'm glad that there's more decorative blocks, but it is kind of irritating that they can't actually be used as part of the portal. Apart from the corners, but those don't really matter. And like so, we were ready to enter the nether. Right now, my primary objective is finding ancient debris, but before that, I think it's wise to make some fire resistance potions, so we're going to try to get some blaze rods too. And by some random luck of the gods, we spawned directly next to a blaze spawner. This was pretty easy to deal with a bow enchanted with infinity and good diamond armor. I remember when I first started playing, doing these kinds of things just felt so impossible and stressful, but I'd never really bothered upgrading beyond iron before, so I guess that probably had a lot to do with it. My next conquest was a bastion. This is again something that I've never actually done because I was too afraid of dying, which I play with keep inventory on, so there's actually no reason to be afraid of dying, but it's just an instinct, you know? This one was half spawned into a basalt delta. I don't know if they're always done that way, but it was really, I don't know, decrepit? I don't mean to judge anybody's interior design, but this was just confusing. You see this? This is important for later. Wow. Like I said, I play with keep inventory on, so there was no actual consequence to that apart from I had to travel all the way back. But it was almost convenient to get to drop off my inventory. I was, however, a little anxious, so I decided to go ahead and make those fire resistance potions so we wouldn't have to deal with that again. One of my biggest issues at this point was a lack of food, which meant it was time to create a cow crusher. Well, not actually a cow crusher. This one works with lava, but you get my point. I actually had a bunch of sheep follow me too. I really wish there were separate things to guide them, so they had to be dealt with separately, which really sucked because the next thing I was building was a wool farm, and it would have been nice to have them in here, but I didn't want to bother breaking the blocks, letting them out, getting the cows back in, so I just grabbed a couple others. This is super cool and really simple. When they eat the grass, it sends a pulse to the redstone, and the dispenser dispenses the shears, which cuts the wheat, and that falls into a hopper and a chest collection system. Redstone is another thing I'd like to get really familiar with this world. I'm thinking of building some kind of possibly working portcullis. I don't know if there's actually designs for that. I wouldn't be surprised. Since next episode, the goal is to build a tiny castle, which meant we were going to need a buttload of stone. Even if you're really not a farms kind of person, like you'd rather just naturally grab everything that you can from the world and survive based on your own, let's say, gumption, I still really recommend this stone generator. It's really easy, it's very convenient, and if you like to build, this will make it so you can actually enjoy the building part instead of having to spend a bunch of time in the ground. This is a silk touch pickaxe, which means a lot of this is stone instead of cobblestone, and it just saves time on the whole having to smelt the cobblestone part. Something that I learned in the process of building this is you can press F3 and T, that way you can have this going without you sitting there and holding the button. I don't know if this is a glitch or what, but it's super convenient for these kinds of AFK farms. One of the best ways to find ancient debris, at least from the quick YouTube tutorials I watched, was TNT mining. Or bed mining, but this is a little bit safer. And since I have no problem with auto farms, we're gathering cats to make our first gunpowder farm. This design is super cool, especially because you can actually double up the layers and increase its capacity, but I think one layer is perfectly fine for my needs. It is a bit of an eyesore when it's done though, and I really wish I'd built it far away from our village. I may or may not use god powers to just cut and paste that somewhere else. The trapdoors here are what make this a creeper farm instead of just a mob farm. Their specific height makes it so they can spawn under these trapdoors where zombies or skeletons can't. At least that's my understanding of it. For this farm, you need to be a certain distance away, that way the creepers can actually spawn. I decided the best way to do this would be to build up in a tower so I can have elevators and just kind of a drop pit to come back down. This took a lot of stone and a very long time to do. Jumping down from there 100% gave me motion sickness, but once we got it going properly, there was a good amount of gunpowder. This was another one of those things that you have to kind of sit and let it just go for a couple hours real time. But I 100% recommend, if you're okay with cheating just a little bit, turning off your daylight cycle, because I let this run pretty much all day at a point. Having the nights go, no problem, and I was protected, but all of my villagers were kind of eaten in the night. I ended up having to breed a whole lot more so we can even use this village for its most powerful purpose. Some of the villagers I lost were actually my mending and silk touch librarians, as well as my hunter, which had the slime balls, and a couple of my fishermen. But the gunpowder and sand allowed us to craft a fair amount of TNT. And those fire resistance potions meant we could just... Do I recommend this as your main mode of travel? No. You move very slow through lava. One of the first things I did on my second trip was to return to the bastion in search of a nether upgrade template. Yes, I come back here a couple of times looking for one because it wasn't until this point that I watched a proper tutorial on netherite and realized that you needed it. Obviously, I didn't find it, and I didn't realize why I didn't find it until I was editing this video. Eventually though, I did give up on the upgrade template for the time being and got to blowing stuff up. This was... so fun and really satisfying to watch. Some of the best tips that I saw for doing this were to make sure that you're mining on chunk borders, which means pressing F3 and G, assuming you're on Java and on Windows, so you can actually see where those grids lie. And when I did that, I found my first pieces of ancient debris. Heck yeah, who's a real Minecraft player now? It's so fun to just do things that you've never tried before and succeeding in things that you thought would be too scary or too difficult, even if it might seem as frivolous as playing a video game. That's still really cool to accomplish. Unfortunately, I didn't have quite enough netherite scrap, which meant jumping right back in there and doing it again. Are they all gonna get mad at me if I get this one? I feel like nobody's watching, so they really shouldn't know. He would not move. Like, am I missing something? I thought that you could fish them up, and it even has a saddle, and just ride them across the lava lake, but he would not move. With all of that done and out of the way, it was time to venture into the overworld, under Earth, in search of diamonds. While I really only wanted a netherite pickaxe, I didn't want to waste a whole armor template by just using it up. So we needed to find 7 diamonds. That way we could duplicate it and have one to use in the future. And with that very stressful mining trip out of the way, our smithing template duplicated, and first netherite ingot crafted, I had my very first netherite pick. I also put a quartz coastal armor trim on my diamond armor, just because I also had it. This village already had a lot of really nice hills, and since I wanted this castle to sit on the tallest one, everybody else had to go. Which, fortunately for us, gave us a whole lot of really nice resources we can work with later. Once the area was cleared, it was time to get started on the actual outline. Some of the greatest building advice I'd ever heard was to make sure that when you're planning out your builds, you're working in odd numbers. That isn't to say that even numbers can't make good builds, but most of the time, odds are what you want because it gives you the space to have a decent interior, while also having windows and spaces between them, and symmetrical roofs. As you can see, I'm always counting out to make sure that I have a decent amount of space between the walls themselves. So even though this wall is actually 5 blocks wide, the inside room is only going to be 3. Excuse me. I'm also trying to vary the shapes that I'm using, so that one will end up being a tower. In terms of towers, since this is a tiny castle, I usually like to do 3 blocks wide for the wall. That way I can have one thin window in the middle that isn't being clipped off on the interior or exterior. And depending on how round I want the shape, I'll usually skip a block and then start the next wall. I also wanted this to feel really segmented and cozy and small inside, so I'm gonna add a hallway here. So now that we have the basic shape together, it's roughly a square shape, and it doesn't feel like it's leaning too far in either direction. I'm really thinking about what I want each room to be. This is actually a challenge because I didn't do a very good job planning for that here, but it looks nice enough on the ground, so it'll look nice enough when it's built up. I'm also always thinking about varying the heights and levels of the rooms themselves. This one seemed to be the perfect place to have some kind of underground, either entrance to a mine system or just another room. For now, I'm just going to make it the shape of the actual outline, and I might expand it later. Once you have your outline prepared, it's time to just fill it in. I'm going to do all of the beginning stage of this in stone bricks because I have a whole lot of them. And it's a good way to get an idea for the shape of the rooms themselves. Because this is meant to be a tiny castle of sorts, I am going to make it fairly tall. I think I ended somewhere around 7 to 9 blocks for the base layers. But you also need to remember for your top layers, or your second stories, third stories, whatever it may be, that your roof is going to add a lot of height too. The basic shape is good, but at this stage, I'm going to need some scaffolding if I want to be able to get up and down easily, so let's go find a jungle. I did get sidetracked on the way and grabbed a bunch of cherry resources. I'm not saying the roof here will be pink, but we'll definitely have some pink roofs in the future. And also stumbled across another pillager camp. These guys used to scare the heck out of me when I first started playing. Aw, a panda. I think this is probably only my second time actually seeing one in game. And after I got him to cooperate for a picture, we went and grabbed our bamboo. On my way back, I stumbled across this temple? Runes? I'm not really sure, but it was really, really cool. I love running across actual structures. It makes the game feel so much more alive. I'm not sure if this is part of the Tricky Trials. What was that? The archaeology update or a mod that I have installed. But let's go see what loot this has waiting for us. I'll tell you this, not much, but there were so many mobs. I don't think I've ever seen this many drowned in one place before, and definitely not armored ones. Yeah, that was enough for me. I am not an adventure gamer. And so back to our little cozy hamlet we went. Something else I like to think about when I'm building something like this is adding multiple faces to the same section. It just adds a lot more visual interest to your builds when you have multiple windows, faces, outlets, anything that's just kind of breaking up large surface areas. I decided to go ahead and fill in the floor here because this is a nice natural place for it where the top layer kind of meets on that outside balcony area. One of my favorite things in a build are interior balconies. It's probably not the best word for them. No, I think the word is loft, but any place where you can add like a wall overlooking the inside, like into this tower, I love that. Immediately elevates the build. And here's how we're looking so far. I did add a balcony in front of that window, and while I am starting to love the shape of it, the cobblestone or the stone bricks do feel very monotonous. I thought that I could stick with it and just kind of maybe vary up the texture of the stone, but we're gonna end up going and grabbing some more materials to make this more interesting. For the time being though, let's bring in that castle feel with some parapets. I do this very simply with just stairs, slabs, and sometimes walls, but there are a lot more intricate ways to do this if you want a more complex design. I like to find my recipes for things and just stick with it so the process flows and doesn't feel like something that I'm stressed out doing. Another thing I absolutely love if I can fit it into a build, which a build of this scale you absolutely can, is a patio or an outdoor section. I had originally thought to make this the bedroom, but it's not working with the flow. Back on the idea of making your walls more interesting, one of the most basic ways to do that is to add windows. I tend to vary the shape of the windows depending on where I'm putting them. Tower windows I obviously like to be a lot taller because you have taller walls to work with, and in short squat sections like this, I love to add horizontal windows. So I'll take out a 3 tall section, frame both the top and the bottom and stairs, and eventually I'll fill that out with iron bars. By this point I realized that this design isn't actually going to work because you can't get into that other room from here. And I kind of want to close this section off so those other 2 smaller rooms feel like their own separate section. I'm always thinking about the flow of progressing through the building, especially if I'm going to put, say, storage somewhere that I'm going to need to access frequently. I don't want it to be somewhere that's difficult to have to navigate through. And by moving the staircase forward a few blocks, we can now get up and down very easily and still enter the actual room. Hello, Mr. B. Now that we've got everything basically in place, it's time to really plan out the purpose of each room before we proceed with the roof and with styling. I'm going to say I did not do a very good job laying this out, just based on the needs that I have for a starter base. A lot of these rooms have too many stairs, doorways, or outlets that don't allow plenty of space to actually build an interior, which is why you can see me struggling to decide what to do with this pass-through. Even this, though I originally loved the idea of having that loft section, I'm probably going to turn that into a full floor so I can actually use a full room. And I'm probably going to have to take out these bottom windows so this can be turned into some kind of enchanting station. Firstly, we added a little bit of detail to the outside. I am a sucker for a good window box, so I added those anywhere I thought just needed a little something. I also went in and added in the iron bars in places that I thought would look good instead of glass. An alternative to this, if you don't want to spend the iron, is a good fence post. And yeah, that's pretty much all I got done between the episodes. I didn't want to do too much without being able to show you my process, because I kind of want to talk you through everything I'm doing here, so when you want to do your own builds, you have a little bit better of an idea of what to start with and where to go. I have been struggling so much with figuring out what to do with these rooms. I did decide down here would be deep storage, and the top layer would be like the prettier kind of storage and the things that I need to access more often. Over here, I'm thinking some kind of furnace smelting, but make it look like a kitchen with a chimney going up and down. And possibly brewing, possibly enchanting in here. A pantry, so specifically food storage, and again, possibly brewing, possibly enchanting. Since I have access to enchanted gear, I'll probably put the enchanting in the basement, the less accessible place, because I don't anticipate using it as often. This is just going to be some kind of plants and whatnot. Again, just another sort of pass-through, a patio out here, and then the bedroom, which I might turn back into a loft, or I might make a cute little sit-down tea area, since we do have some Let's Do mods involved. The next step was an entryway. I am so sick and tired of the villagers and the iron golems wandering into my base. I was originally planning to do something reminiscent of like the Hobbit doors from the Hobbit hole trend a couple of years ago, but I don't think I gave myself enough space to actually add in the detailing. I started out with oak since it's what we have the most access to around here, but I immediately decided to swap that out for spruce. Thankfully, we have a waystone to a spruce village, and that gave us access to harvesting a few trapdoors from their own buildings. And that, excuse me, is our basic details done. But we have a lot of resources to collect because I want to make this thing so much prettier than it already is. I'm definitely thinking reminiscent of our old Fairycore villages, so calcite, diorite, and either dark oak or deep slate framing the roofing. Get out of my house. Like, I can't even close this because now he's just trapped in here. And worse than that, I don't even know where he went. Well, the house ate him, I guess. The next thing on my to-do was to gather some purple dye. This is done with red dye and blue dye, usually from flowers, and thankfully, we actually have a poppy farm. And a flower forest right outside of our home. I did grab a bunch of extras, like these white tulips, which are my absolute favorite, to fill in our window boxes. But in the entire expanse of this kind of island flower forest, these were the only cornflowers, the only blue dye available. Now, I'm pretty sure you can use lapis for dye as well, but that just kind of feels like a waste, especially if you have plans to enchant things. The lavender is probably my second favorite. If there's any resource pack that you download, it should be the alliums to lavender. This is just perfect, and they look so much cuter than the alliums. In the exact opposite vibe of our flower forest, we went back down into the deep earth, specifically in search of amethyst geodes. But we also came across quite a few diamonds I missed on my last time here. Now we only end up with 5, so we can't duplicate our smithing template, but it's a good start. And thankfully, since this cave was so deep and so massive, there was a very easily accessible geode. Always, always, always dig out around your diamonds. There could be more hidden just beneath the surface. I wasn't that lucky here, but I usually am. Same thing with your iron. In days past, in videos past, I always made a point to joke about how I'm not going to pay attention to whether or not an amethyst is budding. Yeah, that was a mistake. I absolutely will be avoiding them this time so we can actually use this geode again in the future. I think the caves update that added these massive caverns was absolutely my favorite. For one, it makes getting resources so much easier if you don't mind dealing with mobs. And for another, they're absolutely gorgeous. I did end up leaving the cave to go and do something else, which we'll see next, but it felt kind of back and forth in the edit, so here is me just gathering a bunch of diorite and andesite to add in some texture to our walls. Surprisingly enough, because I know a lot of people feel like this was just, okay, different stone, andesite is actually what got me back into Minecraft. The way that it looked in the Mizuno's texture pack, at least back then, because it has changed since the addition of the deep slate, was just so, so beautiful. It inspired me so much for so many different like cottagecore kitchens and castles. I started playing, and here we are. 3-4 years later. It's kind of crazy to me that Mizuno's is like, what, defunct, depreciated, but I still love playing with it. It's beautiful, and I don't mind the mismatch of textures. Guess what we found? Directly next to that spruce village. A whole meadow of cornflowers. I plan to use this again for the purple dye, which will be applied to our wool, so we can have purple wool in a sort of gradient for the roofing, and glass, so we can have that beautiful hexing purple window texture. And this also allowed us to grab our dark oak, which is what I was originally searching for out here, to line our roofing in a beautiful, darkish, almost black material. Okay. Now let's talk adding detail. Usually in these kinds of builds, I like to wrap the corners in logs and then bring that back through the wall itself. What height you choose to do this at is entirely up to you. I usually do either 1 or 2 blocks of stone underneath to look like a kind of foundation, and then a lighter material to mimic plaster or limestone on the top. In this case, we're using calcite, which I like because it's a very clean white. I'm just not a warm tones girly, so the stone and the calcite really hits the spot for me. And I'm only going up by 1 block here, so we can have a very smooth roofing as opposed to a peaked one, as a contrast for the roofs at the top of the build. Now this looks nice, but we can take this a step further by mixing in just a couple of other blocks in a similar color tone. In the case of the calcite, I'm going for something that really contrasts. So I'm going with a heavily textured block, polished diorite, because it looks like bricks, and the calcite is very smooth. Another thing I personally love to do is add more texture by adding in stairs under your windows or on top of your windows, so it changes up the shape of the blocks on the walls themselves. In the idea of adding texture, you can do it to the logs as well by mixing in planks. Dark oak planks for dark oak logs would be the obvious choice, but I actually think spruce planks look really, really nice when you strip the dark oak logs. Another way to add some interest to your builds is to add in gradients. Now this works a lot better on very large scale builds that you're viewing from far away, because then the texture of the block kind of disappears and you just sort of read the hue shifts. But I think it can look nice enough on this tower top if we're going from the calcite, mixing it all the way down into the stone. This will play in well because it's the same palette as the rest of the build, but it's not framed the same way with the timber as the flat walls are. It's really, really hard to do this though this way. Definitely easier if you can, like, I don't know, fly around and look at your build. But I'm gonna work on it a little bit and get back to you. Okay, so after a bit of fidangling, this is kind of where we are. It doesn't look fantastic up close, but it doesn't look bad either, and it definitely adds something new to the build itself. I went through and finished up the other side of the build as well, varying which ones I left as full stone and which ones I added in the calcite and diorite and log framing. I also added in a wool awning on the side here, just to break up that large flat wall, and I plan to add some banners to the front in just a bit. But first, let's get our chimney going. This I decided to do with polished andesite. At first, I thought it would be enough to really contrast against the stone, since it's a completely different texture and the tone of the gray is very different, but it really isn't different enough, so I might go through and change this out for something else later. However, I do like the polished andesite for flooring, so I'll use it in the kitchen as a kind of tile, and later on figure out how I want to handle the threshold of the shifting materials. Well, guess who's got good news and bad news? Good news, I remembered how to work the replay mod. Bad news, I didn't change my settings between recording these episodes and my podcast for my other channel, so we don't have any game audio. Which means I have to be on my best yappiness behavior. We'll see how it goes. This episode we finally got to finish up that tiny, cozy Fairycore castle. With shallow roofs like these, you're just placing a stair and then alternating them from upright and upside down. In the middle, I like to add some kind of light feature, whether that's a lantern hanging from a chain just straight from the top, or a lantern itself without the chain, or adding in a full block here so we can actually place the lantern directly in front of the window. I'll then go and fill in the sides fully with stairs in this one. I know that I'm going to use the purple gradient on the big roofs, so for the smaller roofs, I wanted to do all dark oak so it can add a bit of contrast. For the other roof shape where you're going up an extra block, instead of doing stair, upside down stair, stair, we're going to do stair, upside down stair, full planks, and then stair again. This is what's going to create that jump and give us a peaked shape instead of a symmetrical shape. I end up changing this just a bit because the chimney here does make this look a little awkward, but this shape is definitely my favorite for pretty much all of my roofs, especially if we're talking fantasy or fairycore or medieval-esque builds. I'm never going to get over the sound of the amethyst. Thankfully for the replay parts, I do have the actual audio. Once I got to this part, I was really unsure what I wanted to do next. Part of me thought have these be two completely separate buildings with two completely different end-capped roofs, but I think I'm going to go with bringing it all the way across instead. That could have been really, really bad. Taking a break from the roofs, I did go ahead and make my banners and just completed that little outdoor storage area. Everything is looking pretty good so far. I did continue the roof fully across on that top part. So now we just need to finish off the end section with the dark oak wood. I also sometimes like to do this in deep slate, just something that's really beautiful and dark. I don't know why I never bothered making scaffolding in any of my other builds before. This makes this so much easier. I will say one of the worst part about building this part of a really big build is forgetting materials, so you have to keep going like up and down. These make this so much more convenient. For the side strip here, you want to kind of disguise where the roof material touches the walls. Usually I'll just do stairs straight across, but sometimes when I want a little more pizzazz, I will alternate the direction of the stairs. This is going to get a little bit complicated right here because we do need to put another roof on top of this tower. Am I procrastinating it? Yes. For some reason, towers are just something that never really fully clicked in my brain, and every time I have to do them, I feel like I'm going to make it look really odd. Unlike the front section where I just went with the stairs all the way across, this time I decided to go ahead and use amethyst because it's beautiful and I really, really love it. And to disguise where it's connecting with the patio section, I'm just going to continue the parapets. Now I did this wall incorrectly when I first planned this out, but it doesn't really matter. I could just bring it back one anyways. I'm planning this roof out entirely in wool, so I don't have to think about the different alternating blocks that I'm going to use in the end. I can just focus on shape. And if there's anything I can communicate or advise when it comes to building, it's to do it exactly that way. Break it down into pieces, especially if you're planning something really, really big. Shape is usually more important when it comes to communicating what it is that you're trying to build and making it look nice to other people, if that's what you care about. And then once you've nailed the shape, you can come in and refine your block palette. You are going to be a little bit more limited when it comes to survival, unless you're someone that just tackles the end and does things like that with no problem. I'm not. So I tend to stick with some pretty basic resources. For towers, I like to encapsulate the corners, then build up 2 layers, then do kind of a cross up 2 layers, and then 2 just for the top part. Sometimes I'll also put one over the middle here. To outline the edges, I'm pretty much following the same pattern as any other roof that just kind of goes up by 1 block. So a stair, an upside down stair, another stair, and then something in the center. And this is what the back ended up looking like. I do need to fix the corners on some of these. It can be kind of hard to place the upside down stairs depending on how you're going about it. But I think it looks really, really nice. And once we got that done, it was time to think about the windows. Obviously, I had to go with purple stained glass, but I didn't want to use all purple stained glass. And for some of these, I kind of want you to be able to walk up and out and look over almost like it's a patio. So we'll figure out what we want to do with that a little bit later. To finish off that entryway, I went with campfires. This is probably one of my favorite build hacks, tips, ideas. I didn't come up with it, but when I saw it the first time, I was in love. They look so, so beautiful, and they add just this nice rustic touch, especially to an area that you want to feel enclosed, but not entirely outside. I really don't like them going in and out of my base. I always feel like I'm going to accidentally smack one of the villagers while I'm trying to build here, so that's definitely been a little stressful. Once I finished with the structure of these things, I just went through and added in leaves pretty much anywhere that I felt were either awkward corners, odd little places that needed to be covered, or things that could be blended together better. I did take a little bit of a detour to a desert so I could find some cactus and make green dye so I could make cyan window panes. I then went and found a swamp to get some blue orchids, once again to make window panes. This time we're doing light blue. In Mizuno's, the light blue has a very similar texture to the purple, but instead of being purple, it's just clear. And the cyan stained glass has a really beautiful, slight edge decoration, but mostly empty. Let's take a look at the inside of our tiny, cozy Fairycore castle. Coming right in, I decided to open up this wall so you can kind of peek into the sections behind. I haven't picked banner designs yet, but I will eventually. This is where I ended up moving the bedroom. I just lifted the bed up onto some bookshelves and added in a small little seating area. Of course, we have to have a ridiculous amount of leaves everywhere because, well, it's me. Down here is kind of the workshop area where we've got our grindstone. No, what is that? Our stone cutter and an anvil. I figured this would be the perfect spot to also put our brewing station. I just forgot. And down here we have our full storage section. This is the kitchen, all cozy and cute. And over here is kind of like the get ready and go next to the waystone. So all of our kind of survival gear and our diamond armor. I did add that big window there because it felt kind of dark down here. This with the stairs that are waterlogged in any kind of almost underground or basement-y area, I ended up getting from a Forge Labs video. I don't remember which one, but I just thought it was such a cute design. Right here is our pantry section where we're going to have all of our food since the kitchen is right next to it. And then I moved the nether portal inside of here. Up these stairs, we have our enchanting section, or our library. And I like to tuck as many little sit-down, cozy hangout areas as possible, so this is to overlook the other side of the castle. And this is another one to overlook the front of the castle. I really, really love it here. Right here is just a secondary kind of almost prep station where you might put together some quick snacks or anything like that, since this is our outdoor patio area. I kind of want to add more flowers up here, but I'm not really sure how I want to do that yet. And that was our start in this cozy, cozy world. I do plan to come back here and add a lot more stuff, but for now, I'm planning to make a couple tutorials next. So, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.